All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome. It is time for our set review. Complete set review. We go over every single card, the new Magic the Gathering set, Dungeons and Dragons, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, the crossover set. We crossing over, folks. And this set takes place of the core set. Usually there's a core set every year. This year, we're like, screw that. We're going to do a crossover set with Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know much about Dungeons and Dragons. Never played D&D before. So to me, if I saw this set not knowing it was a Dungeons and Dragons theme set, I would never know. You know, there's goblins, there's elves. It all seems pretty normal to me. But that's what's going on. And of course, full set review, we go over every single card. We do limited. We do constructed. We do all the works. We also do a best in show for each color as well. And we have a new feature in store. That's a new one for each color. That's right. And you'll see that one when it happens. And it's going to be cool. It was Nicole's idea from the last set review. I like it a lot. 7 videos, 7 sections, all one for each color. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can see all the videos and check all that out. If you're watching on Twitch, say hi. You're all great. I love you all. And we're going to start with white. Of course, we always start with white because it's the worst color. And it's sort of like the opening band where people are still kind of like, you know, strolling into the venue, and no one really cares about them anyway.
Card game? It's more likely than you think.
What's up, Optimator? How's it going? So let's get started here. Now, before we start with white, we do have to go over one major thing that will affect all the colors. Now, if you remember my Strixhaven review, I actually made a separate section at the very start of it for a lesson package. I did all the lesson cards in their own section because without knowing what the lesson cards were, we couldn't contextualize the learn mechanic. Well, we have the same idea here in the D&D set because of the dungeons, right? So there are 3 dungeons. These are sort of like emblem tokens that exist outside the game, but are referenced to the venture mechanic. And the venture mechanic basically says, pick one of the dungeons and start doing it, and every time you venture henceforth, you go to the next room in the dungeon. So Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Lost Mine of Phandelver, and Tomb of Annihilation. Now, I've already gone over this in great depth in my article on CoolStuffInc.com. Go look for it. Just type in, CoolStuffInc.com, What in the World's a Dungeon, Jim Davis, and go read the article. I go through in depth, all the way from top to bottom. I go over every dungeon, how it works, and how it's going to affect your game. So, not going to go over that here. I'm going to assume you know what a dungeon is and know how Venture works, and we'll just do it like that. Let's get started with our first card. And it is the card that makes every person who runs a Magic the Gathering website or database really unhappy. +2 Mace. So, of course, if you're a programmer, I'm sure the plus sign is not a usual character, and I'm sure it screws everything up, which is just hilarious to me. But here it is, the +2 Mace. 2 mana for an equipment. Equip creature gets +2/+2, equip for 3. Now, of course, Volshock Morningstar was this card, but just colorless and equipped for 2. Back in Mirrodin block. That card was really good. But equip 3 is a lot more of an equip 2. Obviously not a constructed card. In limited, I mean, equipment's usually pretty good in limited because you can kind of keep using it. It's a mana sink late in the game. Equip 3 is a lot though. So this card seems reasonable. Imagine you're going to play it on turn 5 a lot, where you have a 4-drop in play. You go turn 5, play, equip, attack. Going to be good in longer games. Going to be better, a lot better in sealed as the game goes longer. You need things to do with your mana. So it's going to matter a lot of like, do I need things to do with my mana in limited? If I do, this can sort of pull that one off. But it is a little clunky. And again, if this costs 3 and the equip was 2, I'd be a lot more about it. But 3 is a lot to move this thing around. And part of the allure of moving it around is, you attack with it, move it to a blocker. That's pretty cool. But it's kind of clunky. There are some Equipment Matters cards as well. But it seems like a decent limited common if you need a mana sink. But I'm not really like super enthused about it. Moving on to Abora Pegasus. This is a 4-mana 2/3 flyer common. When it comes into play, it jumps a creature and gives it +1/+1. Now, this card was really good in Ixalan Limited. It was a dinosaur, but it was also a 3/3. And a 3/3 flyer for 4 is obviously a lot better than a 2/3. This card seems pretty reasonable in your aggro decks. It's a nice bonus, pushes your crappy 2-drop past blockers. It's a flying body itself. I'm not really pumped about this card. Too much in limited if you're not very aggressive. If you're just kind of like a slower deck or a more controlling deck or a more late game deck, I just think it's like kind of okay, but a very good curve topper for your aggressive limited deck. We'll see how important flying is contextually in the format, but I like it. It's a solid draft common, nothing crazy. I definitely imagine limited decks that don't really want this card, and I imagine limited decks that do really want this card. So, your results will vary based on the how it fits into your deck. Next card is Blink Dog. 3 mana for a 1/1 double strike. It has teleport. Now, it's important to note, it's a little bit confusing that there's a ton of ability words on the cards in this set that are just flavor words. They link back to some sort of D&D spell or ability or effect that I don't really know about. So teleport is not a keyword. It just kind of like giving a fun, flavorful name to the ability. I love this. I think it's really, really cool and flavorful, but I hate that it's exactly the same templating as a keyword. So you look at it and you think, oh wow, is teleport the new keyword in a set? But it's not. It's just a kind of a flavor word. So I wish they had made some way to differentiate between what a keyword is and what this sort of like flavor words are. Whether it's quotes, if they bolded it, put it in a different font. I don't know, just something differentiate. Minor pet peeve. All in all, though, I do think it's a very flavorful thing. It's kind of cool. So that's an ability to phase out. So phasing things just kind of like go away and then come back the next turn. That's kind of cool. It's definitely very expensive. You can kind of like block with it and then phase it out kind of thing. Seems like the kind of card where if we can put counters on it and limited, it's pretty great. One of the dungeons does make counters. So kind of like your typical draft card. I feel like this 3 mana double striker has been a card in limited for a while now. You'll kind of know if you want it or not. Can your deck pump it? And it's probably good. If it can't, not too exciting. And this teleport ability is pretty clunky. So I'm not super thrilled about it. Kind of just your niche draft common. Nothing too exciting. It's a medium boy, not a very good boy. Up next is the Book of Exalted Deeds. Now, our first big mythic here. We still have this card on 10 New Brews. Of course, this card is a combo with Faceless Haven. If you can use the book, I'll read the book first. So, mini for end step. If you gain 3 or more life this turn, make a 3/3 flyer. And then you can exile the book and target an angel you control. Puts a counter on it that makes it a platinum angel. So, you can't lose and your opponent can't win. So, they can't remove the creature. You just can't lose. So, you, by default, win the game, I suppose. And you can activate the book, targeting a Faceless Haven, and then never activate it again. And if your opponent can't kill a land, well,
So you get nothing!
So we pulled that off in the 10 New Brews. It was definitely super cool. Obviously, you can just play one Field of Ruin in your deck in Standard. You'll never lose to that because you'll just build a winning board and eventually Field of Ruin it. But thing to note, but this card's pretty good. Obviously, it's white, white, white. It's cool for Devotion. It plays well with Heliod. And just a really good engine. We built a deck for 10 New Brews that was just like this and removal spells that gain life. So, for example, Faith Fetters and so on and so forth. Play this, kill your thing, make an angel. Kill your thing, make an angel. Kill your thing, make an angel. So, definitely a very powerful card with a kind of a cool backdoor combo. It's a powerful one. I don't think it's like overtly powerful or anything like that. And yes, Field of Ruin is going to rotate, but you know it's not rotating yet. Everyone's all pumped about like Standard 2022. We're not rotated yet, folks. Eldraine is still legal. So cool card. I like it a lot. In limited, probably a little too tough to pull off, but definitely a pretty cool constructed card for a number of reasons. Up next is Celestial Unicorn. This is a 3 mana Ajani's Pridemate. And there are some life gain synergy stuff in green and white in limited. This is obviously much worse than a Pridemate because costing 3 is a lot worse than 2. And a 3/2 base stats on a 3 mana creature, much worse than a bear, but still probably a pretty solid limited common. As I always say in these set reviews, any limited card that can scale up as the game goes on is very, very good. Occasionally, limited games have the tendency to stagnate in some way, and you get into a board stall. So a card that will continuously grow and scale up is very good. So probably an archetype-specific draft common for the green-white life gain archetype. If you're not doing that exactly, it's not very good, but if you are, it should be very good. Kind of the kind of card that if you table this card, your deck is probably open, kind of thing. Up next is Cleric Glass. This is our new type of card here. Obviously ruins my beautiful overlay here. Whatever. And class cards are sort of like a mixture between sagas and between level up cards. So you play the class card. It's an enchantment. And it starts on level 1. And level 1 here is if you would gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. So for 1 mana, it's an enchantment, it does that. Then you can pay the mana to level it up and gain the level 2 ability. It'll still keep the level 1 ability as well. So 4 mana, you can activate it to whenever you gain life, put a counter on a creature you control. So it's a 4 mana or kind of a 5 mana Heliod. And then level 3, 5 mana. When it becomes level 3, its triggered ability, it returns a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you gain life for its toughness. So kind of a big reanimation effect, but it is very expensive. The total mana cost here is 10 to reanimate a creature. So kind of a mana sink, which is pretty cool. I think this card's a little clunky. I'm pretty down on a lot of the class cards. I think they're all a little too slow with a few exceptions. I don't think the first level of this is like that good. And then level 2 is like okay, but kind of clunky. Level 3 is very powerful, but very, very slow. So this one's kind of all right. I'm not super on it. I just think it's okay. In limited, definitely super solid if you're playing life gain deck, because same idea, that second ability can scale up, and you have a mana sink for a third ability. So in limited, I like this card a lot, especially if you're in like a life gain kind of deck. But constructed, I think this card's a little too slow and a little too clunky. I'm not really super on it. But in limited, for sure, having the ability to have a sort of mana sink is phenomenal, where later in the game, they kill a creature, you reanimate it, you gain some life. It is important to note also that these are all sorcery abilities on these level ups, so they are not activatable at instant speed, which is pretty important. Up next is Cleric Gargoyle, and we actually played this card in our venture deck in Standard. So this is our first venture card. So you can see here when it comes into play, you venture into the dungeon. So as we were saying before, there are 3 dungeons. If you're not currently in a dungeon, you pick one of them and you start it. Once you start a dungeon, you cannot go to a different dungeon until you finish it. And every time you venture, you move 1 room down the dungeon. And it's a pretty powerful effect. It seems very, very important and limited. I would guess that Venture is going to be very similar to Lesson Learn from Strixhaven, where it looks a little unassuming, but the whole format is going to revolve around it. And this one's really, really good. This is an 0/4 for 3, so it has decent base stats defensively. And then once you've finished a dungeon, it turns into a 3/4 flyer, which is awesome for 3 mana. So it's card advantage, it's a good blocker, and it goes into a late game card as well. I think this is a great draft common. I think this card has an outside shot of being a constructed card. Probably a little below the bar, but not too crazy. And then very, very good in limited. Like this card a lot. You want to venture and venture often in limited is my guess. Up next is Dancing Sword. 2 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. It equips for only 1. And whenever equipped creature dies, you may have Dancing Sword turn into a 2/1 construct artifact creature with flying and ward 1. If you do, it stops being an equipment. I like this card a lot. So unlike a lot of the equipments we see lately that are kind of very clunky and expensive, this one's pretty reasonable. 2 mana to play it, 1 mana to equip it. So a total of 3, invested in 3. You can go play a 2-drop on turn 2, and then fire it off on turn 3. Trusty Machete style, yeah, just reversed. It's actually better than Machete because it costs 2 and then equips for 1. So +2/+1 is a very reasonable buff. And then you also have the option of, if they kill your creature and it was your last creature, you just pop this thing off, and now it's 2/1 flyer. It's annoying to kill. So I like this card a lot. I think this equipment is very, very good. I think this card is phenomenal in limited. Just an absolutely phenomenal limited card. Very, very high power level. Very, very good on rate. Equip cost is phenomenal. And then that extra sort of Dancing Sword ability is just a nice upside to have as well. I imagine you'll want to turn it into a Dancing Sword less in limited than constructed, because equipment are so good in constructed. But in limited, efficiency-wise, in constructed efficiency-wise, I think this card's super awesome. So I like this card a lot. I think this card will see play in constructed, be a great limited card, and I'm very impressed with this one. I like it a lot. Probably not for older formats. It's not like that good. It's not like we're like kind of Stoneforge Mystic for this card, but I think this card's really, really good. I like it a lot. Up next is Dawnbringer Cleric. Now we see these ability words again that aren't actually abilities. So 1/3 comes into play. You can dispel an enchantment. You can gain 2 life or exile a card from a graveyard. Kind of a cool sideboard card in constructed. It does a lot, honestly. I mean, a 1/3 that gains 2 life is always reasonable against an aggro deck. Killing enchantments is reasonable too. And then exiling a card from a graveyard is okay. Definitely sideboard power level material. We're not really hammering it home on rate here. But in limited, this card is pretty reasonable. You know, a 1/3 that gains 2 is fine in your defensive deck. And there's a lot of class cards going around, so killing an enchantment is pretty relevant. And then occasionally the graveyard one will come up. But I think this is definitely a super solid common for limited. Not a card you're always going to play, but kind of like your meat and potatoes 2-drop for sure. And it's got an outside shot at like sideboard stuff in constructed. Up next is Delver's Torch. 2 mana equipment. +1/+1. Whenever it attacks, you venture, and it equips for 3. And I think I like this card better than the +2 mace, where the stats are extremely similar as far as equip cost and cost of the equipment. But it trades +1/+1 for the ability to venture over and over and over again. And that's a huge thing. I think venturing is going to be a huge part of the limited format. Being able to do this over and over and over again is huge. I'm honestly kind of surprised this card is a common and not an uncommon, because it feels very powerful. I think this is going to be an important limited card for sure. Like this one a lot. Constructed, probably not, but definitely looks like a super good limited card, especially if you're interested in venturing a lot. So like it a lot. Super cool card. Up next is the Voted Paladin, 5 mana for a 4/4. Comes into play, creatures you control get +1/+1 in Vigilance on its turn. This is your standard curve topper in Limited. Usually this is like a Flying Angel, but this time it's a ground creature. It's a 4/4. If you're an aggressive deck and you want to top your curve, this card seems great. Vigilance and +1/+1 means you can attack for a huge alpha strike and not die in the backswing. Just a super solid curve topper. Probably not like a super high pick because you don't want to have that many of this card. There are definitely diminishing returns in your 5 drops, but I like this card a lot as your curve topper in Limited. Super solid. If you're filling the board, if you're going wide, this card's a nice way to top it all off. Up next is Divine Smite. There's a cycle of color hosers in the set, sideboard cards. Same idea as the Eldraine ones, where they have a purpose if they are not playing against the color that they want to play against. They're not totally blank, but it's not very good. So instant 2 mana, target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls phases out. So it goes away for 1 turn. But if it's black, exile it. This is sort of like a Celestial Purge or black cards, and then you can phase out something that's not black if you have to. If you're desperate, you got to remove something. Not really a problem. So good sideboard card. This is the kind of card in Limited you should be taking pretty highly. I would definitely want to take this card over some middling card for my deck because it is a super high quality card when you sideboard against black decks. 2 mana instant speed removal is phenomenal. So if you're drafting, you see this card. This is not a card you should take it like last pick. This is a card you should take in the middle of the pack, if not a little earlier. I would not want to take some common 4-drop whatever creature over this because the value of this is so high in your sideboarding. So good sideboard card, both formats. Divine Smite. Up next is Dragon's Disciple. 2 mana for a 1/3. And comes into play. You may reveal a dragon card from your hand. If you do, or if you control a dragon, it comes into play as a 2/4. And it also gives your dragons Ward 1. And we saw this stuff in Dragons of Tarkir. These sort of dragon cards where they get better if you have a dragon. Draconic Roar and so on and so forth. I think this card's pretty sweet. A 2/4 for 2 with upside is reasonable, if not super exciting. Ward 1's also kind of nice too. It's probably not there and constructed. It's probably just like a little bit short. Unless the 2/4 body happens to line up really well against the aggressive creatures in the format. Like if there's a lot of 3/2s, in the aggro decks, we have this 2/4, it's pretty good. But just an okay card. Probably not super big constructed. And then in Limited, I'd want to have a decent number of dragons before I play this card. But a 1/3 for 2 is not the end of the world if you need an offensive creature in your deck. So definitely contextual in both formats. But it's a fine card. I think it's a little under the bar, though. A little under the bar. Up next is Dwarf Hold Champion. 2 mana for a 3/1. As long as it's equipped, it gets +2/+0/+2. There's your average 2-drop common. It's okay. The body's fine. It can attack. Trades with a lot of stuff. If you're playing a lot of equipment, the value will go up a lot. I imagine this card is quite good with the Venture equipment. You'll have a 4/4, which is pretty nice, honestly. And just a curve filler. Not a card you're super excited about, but certainly reasonable for sure. Up next is Flumph, and this is a weird one. We actually we had this card last night in the Hunter Pence Sweatsuit Invitational Draft Tournament. It's an 0/4 Flying Defender. Whenever it's dealt damage, you and your opponent each draw a card. This is a very weird effect because both players drawing is even on card parity. It's not like either player is getting ahead or behind. But some decks can make use of more cards than other. For example, if you're playing Mono Red Burn, you're much more excited to draw an extra card than you are if you're playing like a super clunky mid-range deck, because the Mono Red deck can empty its hand faster and therefore kind of keep using its resources. So we had this deck in our deck last night. Our deck was kind of slow. We lost to an aggro deck, and it felt like it was kind of bad for us because they were attacking into it and drawing cards, and they were able to deploy their cards faster than we were, so it didn't seem kind of great. I can't really picture why this card would ever see play in a constructed format because it just like it doesn't do the thing it does consistently, which is make both players draw cards. And I don't know what deck would want this effect if you're not getting it consistently. So it's just like a weird card, honestly. And then in Limited, I'd be careful with this card. I think you want to make sure your curve is low enough to play with this card in Limited. I think it's reasonable if it is, but I'd be aware. It's a weird card. It plays a lot weirder than it looks, and I just don't really know what the purpose of this card is. It's a Flumph. Gloom Stalker is next, and part of the Venture mechanic and the Dungeon mechanic is there are some cards that care about finishing a dungeon. So this is a 2/3 for 3, which is not very good. But if you finish the dungeon, it has double strike, which makes it a 4/3 for 3, which is a better 4/3. Definitely an archetype if you're going to dungeon finish. Seems fine. But again, like, it's not like great. You know, it's just sort of like a 4/3 double striker for 3 is fine, but not an amazing payoff. It's just a solid card. I think it's just a decent draft common. I think you'll know pretty well if you want this card in your deck or not in limited. But I would not be excited to like grab this card early. This is sort of just like a filler for your adventure deck. Not really super thrilled with it. Up next is Grand Master of Flowers. Nope, no best in show. But a card that I think is very, very good. 4-mana Planeswalker. I think all the Planeswalkers in this set, we've been used to Planeswalkers being really bad since War of a Spark. I think the Planeswalkers in this set are all pretty reasonable. They're sort of like Planeswalker design from a few years ago, where they're not like overtly powerful, but they're all pretty solid. So, Grandmaster of Flowers, 4-mana Planeswalker, starts on 3. As long as Grandmaster of Flowers has 7 or more loyalty counters, it is a 7/7 dragon god with flying indestructible. So, it has no ultimate ability, but it turns into a honkin' chonkin' dragon if you get up on it. It only has 2+ abilities. The first one prevents a creature from attacking or blocking for a turn as long as it doesn't have First Strike, Double Strike, or Vigilance, which is most creatures. And then it also has the plus ability of search your library and or graveyard for a card named Monk of the Open Hand, reveal it, put it in your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So in a way, it sort of makes a token. And we'll get to Monk. Monk's a 1-mana 1/1. It gets bigger as time goes on. It's sort of like Elspeth Knight Errant, where it can make a 1/1 every turn by plussing, but you have to actually cast the card, which can have upsides and downsides, but you need to put the card into your deck. So, for example, if you're playing a blue-white control deck, you don't really want to have the card Monk of Open Hand in your deck. But in order to play this as a token maker, you have to. So this card feels like it's going to be a lot better in decks that actively want Monk of the Open Hand. So white weenie decks, kind of white aggressive decks, but I think this card's pretty powerful. I like this card a lot. And it's a very, very solid white Planeswalker. It gets monks in the graveyard, which is super cool, so you never run out. I like this card a lot. I think this is going to be a solid card. Maybe post-rotation, but I think it's a very solid Planeswalker. It's a very cool design, and I just like it. I think it's sweet. And then limited of this card seems busted as long as you can get 1 or 2 monks. Even just a Planeswalker that just sits there and locks things down every turn and then becomes a dragon's phenomenal and limited. So great limited card. Definitely want to grab at least one Monk of the Open Hand if you have it, but should be very, very good limited. Up next is Guardian of Faith. White 1 for a Spirit Knight with Flash and Vigilance. It's a 3/2. So the body here is okay. A 3/2 for 3 is not particularly exciting, nor is Vigilance on this card because it's going to die on most attacks or blocks. When it enters the battlefield, any number of target creatures you control phase out. So it's sort of like a Restoration Angel card where you can like protect a creature. The thing is, the best part of Resto was flickering comes into play abilities. So flicker of a Thragtusk, get a 3/3, comes back, gain 5 life. Where my boomers at? Huh? Where you at? Are you out there? Someone remembers that, right? And this card can't do that because phasing does not trigger comes into play abilities or leaves play abilities. So without that extra synergy bonus, I don't think this card's very good. People are kind of hyped about this card. I think this card's just very, very mediocre. It can protect things, but it costs a lot of mana to do so. It's not particularly good in play. I'm just not really a big fan of this card. Remember, it does not trigger ETB abilities. Phasing out just puts it to the side like it doesn't exist, and it just kind of exists again. It does not enter the battlefield again. So because of that, not very interested in this card. If it was Restoration Angel and it flickered, we're all about it. But as a phase out, not very excited about this card. It's a solid limited card. You know, if you just leave this up, they play a kill spell, you save your creature. Sure, that's fine. But yeah, I think this card's pretty overrated. Not really pumped on this one. This is fine. Just kind of middling. You know, not super excited about it. Up next is Half Elf Monk. So 4 mana for a 1/4 with Vigilance, and it has a 2 mana tap ability. Just your average kind of, you know, tapper in limited. I do think that 4 mana for a tapper is a lot. Usually tappers cost like 2 mana, maybe 3, occasionally 1. Those are the really good ones. And tapping is a powerful ability in limited, but 4 mana is a lot for a 1/4. I'm pretty unenthused with this card. I think this card could have cost 3 and been totally reasonable. I think at 3, this card's like a very good common. At 4, not super excited about it. I mean, this card might make your deck obviously a little better in sealed. It's a way to push through, but I'm just not that excited about it. I think at 3 mana, this card's very exciting, but not super excited. Up next is Icing Death Frost Tyrant, the mythic legendary dragon. 4 mana for a 4/3 flying vigilance, which is only okay. That third toughness, honestly, I think it would have been better as a 3/4 than a 4/3. I think 4/3 on a 4-drop is a stat line we see a lot on very overrated and mediocre creatures. There's been like so many 4/3 angels that just aren't good because that third toughness is just not enough. There's like the Brazella or whatever, the lifelinking angel. There was the lifelink black angel from a recent set that has like pro planeswalkers. These cards never get anywhere because like they're just not durable enough. So don't like the stats really. When it dies, you make Icing Death Frost Tongue, a legendary equipment with equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you tap a creature and it's equipped too. This card doesn't seem great to me because it's kind of like if you're going to play this card in like a mid-range deck or a control deck, the equipment is almost worthless. You don't need to push through blockers. You don't need +2/+0. Not very exciting. That's usually where you'd want to play your kind of mythic 4 or 5 drop dragon. And then in an aggro deck, it's just a 4/3. You know, like it's okay. It's not really like topping your curve. The card advantage is giving you is only medium. You know, I think that Legion Angel is a much better curve topper. You know, be Legion Angel, get another Legion Angel, get another Legion Angel. So against the removal heavy decks, you're getting an extra big card that's worth it. With this card, you're just getting an equipment that they'll just play a kill spell on anyway. So I'm pretty unimpressed with this card. I'm pretty unenthused with it. I don't think it's very good. I think the power level is pretty low. I think as a 4/4, I'm very excited. I think as a 3/4, I'm also more excited. But as a 4/3, not super excited. I just think this card's kind of eh. I think this card's kind of eh. It's not bad. You know, the power level is reasonable. If you're looking for a 4-drop in your aggro deck, you're playing an equipment deck. But on the whole, I'm just not very impressed with this card at all. In limited, yeah, it's bonkers, obviously. Any 4/3 flyer for 4 is great in limited, regardless of the abilities. And then the that trigger is amazing. So an amazing limited card, but I think it falls a little short constructed. I'm not super thrilled with it. Up next is Ingenious Agent Smith. 2 mana for a 1/1. When it comes into play, look at your top 4 cards. You may reveal an artifact and put it into your hand. Then, whenever one or more artifacts enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on it, but only once a turn, which is huge. So you can't keep going off. If it didn't have that line of text, I think this card is like a modern playable, like really good card. But because it's limited how big it can get, I think it's fine, but not great. Sort of like Glint Crane, but like a lot better because it scales up better. This card is basically a product of its environment. If this card has enough artifacts to get, I think this card's awesome. I think this card's very, very good. But that's a big if. You know, we played an artifact deck in 10 New Brews. It was cool. This card was very good in it, but the artifacts themselves weren't that exciting. So this is a card that's currently lacking a home. If this card can find a home, I think it's a very, very solid card. Honestly, it could be a fun cube card. Cube's a great spot for cards that are like actually quite good, but don't exactly have a home. If your cube is a heavy artifact theme, this card could be awesome. I'm probably going to try this card on my cube as well. And if you get into a spot where you play this, play an artifact immediately, now it's 2/2. Another artifact, now it's a 3/3. And if you have a 3/3 that draws you a card for 2 mana, that's pretty awesome. So very contextual. I think it's a very, very powerful card in the context of if it's good. That context probably does not exist in Standard or in any format that has a power level that is congruent with this card's level. So I feel a little sad with this card almost. I feel like this card's going to get overlooked, even though it's super cool. Moving on, Keen-Eared Sentry, 2 mana for a 2/1. It gives you hexproof, and your opponent can't venture more than once a turn. So, not really a venture hate card. It's pretty hard to venture more than once a turn, honestly. But 2/1 that gives you hexproof. We've seen this see play a little bit. I mean, there's an enchantment creature version of this, which I guess is easier to find with enchantment search effects, but just like a weird, narrow sideboard card. Giving yourself hexproof is kind of a weird ability to have on a fragile creature, because usually it's good against decks that are playing burn, and they can just bolt the Keen-Eared Sentry and then bolt you. Body not very good for limited. This card seems like it's very, very niche. Like maybe if there's, some weird deck in the format that targets you with a lot of things and doesn't kill creatures, sure, but it seems like a very narrow sideboard card, pretty mediocre and limited unless your opponent's really teeing off on the ventures. Pretty unassuming and unimpressive overall. Up next is Loyal Warhound, and folks.
It's a trap!
The new feature on a set review, it's a trap! So we have Best in Show, of course, that we pick the best card of each color. And now we have It's a Trap, the Trap Award, the card that we think is the most kind of overrated. People think it's really, really good. For example, Dothy Voidwalker would have gotten this in the last set review. I think that Loyal Warhound is not very good. Knight of the White Orchid is the closest analogy here. This is a 2-mana 3/1. It has Vigilance. And it has the sort of like on the draw mechanic of when it comes into play, if your opponent has more lands than you have to go search for basic plains. Now, it is a basic plains, and it comes in tapped. I believe Knight of the White Orchid could find any plains, and it came in untapped. So, pretty big downside from that. And realistically, the body here just kind of sucks. I mean, a 3/1 Vigilance might as well not have Vigilance at all, because if it ever gets in combat, it's going to die. It dies to tokens. It's very fragile. Doesn't really do much. I think this card's just not good. I mean, like, I like the idea of it. I like the idea of, cards that are good on the draw. A little bit of card advantage in white. I definitely like the concept of the card. But a 3/1 Vigilance for 2, the fail state of when you don't get a land, which is going to happen any game on the play, and then some of your games on the draw too. And then furthermore, once you activate this card once, all the future cards are never going to trigger, because now you're ahead of land, and it's unlikely your opponent will make up that deficit. So, like, it's bad in multiples. The body's pretty bad. There is a Dog Lord in Standard, but it's true. But all in all, I think this card's very overrated. I think this card is it's just not great. It's not consistent enough at doing what it does. It's not about it. It's not really about this card. So it's a trap. Hopefully y'all like that one. And that's my trap card. In limited, it's fine. It's a pretty reasonable 2-drop. If you're ever gonna land off it in limited, you're really, really happy. But the body's also just kind of too. So That's also true. Ross Merriam's in chat. Ross says a big part of Knight of the White Orchid's power was the ability to double spell a 2-drop when you trigger it. So you're on the draw, your opponent goes land number 3, and you go 2 lands in play, Orchard, get a land, play a land, 2-drop. And like that's like a high enough payoff for the downside of when it's not good. This card can't even do that because the basic plains comes in tapped. So strong agree. And also, Knight of the White Orchid wasn't really like a busted magic card or anything. It was okay. And a 2/2 first striker is a lot better than a 3/1 Vigilance. So not really about this card. Moving on to Minimus Containment. 3 mana for a aura. This is your standard pacifism for limited. Chance of non-land permanents. It turns any of your opponent's permanents into a treasure that loses all of its abilities. This is your pacifism in limited for the most part. Obviously, giving your opponent a mana, it's sort of like a one-shot Path to Exile, is not ideal, but 3 mana to deal with anything is pretty reasonable. So just a solid draft common as far as removal goes. I would not play this card in Constructed, but Jim loves pooping on good Magic cards. Listen, I just call them as I see them, all right? Sometimes I'm wrong. Most of the time, though, I'm right. All right? So yeah, okay removal spell in limited. Reasonable. In Constructed, you have like Banishing Light. You have many better cards than in Constructed. So up next is Monk of the Open Hand. I freaking love this card.
Bingo!
Love this card. I am just in love with the second spell mechanic in white. I think it's a really, really good way to give white a mechanic that rewards it for playing a lot of cheap spells. Those are my shades, actually. I had these way before CGB did. Like, way before. I've had these for, like, 5 years now. So, I love CGB, but I had them first. It's a present from John, my birthday, like 4 or 5 years ago. So, I think this card's awesome. This card is very easy to trigger. And there's a lot of cards in Standard that want you to play a lot of cheap spells. Clever Lumemancer, and so on and so forth. And this card plays perfectly in that. It's a 2-drop, a 1-drop that can attack for 2 on turn 2, which is amazing. I think this card's awesome. I think this card's really, really good. Very solid 1-drop. And it plays really well with a lot of the cards, too. Clarion Spirit, Clever Lumemancer, Leonin, whatever the hell it's called. All these cards play very well together. We played like an all-in white weenie deck with these cards on Tendu Brews. It was awesome. Look for that on Tendu Brews. But like this card a lot. It's going on my cube. I'm all about this card. I think this card's great. I'm all about a good 1-drop, and this one does that very, very well. So, like this card a lot. In limited, I'm a little lower on it, unless you're super aggressive, but still think it's pretty solid. If you can get this thing to a 2/2, you're in fine shape, and then to a 3/3 would be a lot better. But note, it's going to be a lot harder to cast 2 spells in 1 turn in a format that doesn't have Learn Lesson and a format that doesn't have Foretell cards. So be aware of that. You know, if you're thinking about the cards from Kaldheim that cared about 2 spells in a row, Foretell made that a lot easier. So in Limited, it's not as good. But in Constructed, I think it's awesome. And then obviously it's great with the Planeswalker too. So that's an important thing as well. Chat's reminding me of all my misses in my set reviews. Slitherwisp, Sea-Dasher, Octopus. Listen, I ain't right every time. I'm here on the stage, pouring my heart out on my set reviews. Usually before I play with the cards, this is a little bit different. But so I'm here calling the shots, and I get a lot of them right. I certainly miss sometimes, though. What can I say? Moon Blessed Cleric's our next card. 3 mana for a 3/2, which is Divine Intervention. When it comes into play, you can search your library for an enchantment and put it on top. I mean, if you really want to tutor an enchantment, I guess this is not the worst way to do it, but 3 mana for a pretty mediocre body and not card advantage is pretty mopey. I don't really see what deck would want this in Constructed. It's not really super about it. And in Limited, I mean, if you're playing the pacifism and stuff, this can go get it, sure. But it just like the body's just so mopey that I'm not really excited about it. It can find the classes in Limited. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you have like 2 or 3 really good enchantments in your deck in Limited, sure, this card seems fine, but not really about it. And then I think that this card is just too not good for older formats. You know, there are just better ways to tutor enchantments, and this one's just very, very slow. If this was a 2/1 for 2, I think we're talking. But at 3 mana, you can't really have your setup card cost 3 mana, be kind of flimsy, and then not provide card advantage. So, not really about it. Up next is Nadar, Selfless Paladin. There it is. No Akbars here. I think this is the best white card. I think this is a really, really safe pick. This feels like the best venture card and the most reliable venture card. 3 mana for a 3/3 Vigilance is very, very reasonable. And then when it comes into play or attacks, you gain an advantage. So you start venturing, maybe it's a Scry, maybe it's a 1 Goblin token, maybe it's a treasure token. But as time goes on, these things get really, really good. You know, we're talking about like draw a card, draw 3 cards and play one for free, get 2 tokens. You know, the effects on the dungeons get better and better as time goes on. And this one does it over and over and over again. You can flicker it. I think this card is super, super solid. If there's any venture deck in Standard, this is going to be the card for it, not close. Like the premier card, I find it very hard to believe that a venture deck would be better than playing this card or not playing this card for sure. So super, super, super solid card. Older formats, probably not venturing too much, but this set review mostly focuses on Standard as far as Constructed goes, and this one's super reasonable. In Limited, absolute bomb. Absolute bomb. There's a common that costs 4 that only ventures once that seems very, very solid, and this card's just that, but 1,000 times better. So, card's super great. Again, more of a Standard card. Probably won't see much play till Eldraine rotates, but I think this card's very, very powerful. Pretty safe pick, but that's the best in show for white. Up next is Oswald Fiddlebender, and I do like this card a lot, and the reality is that, like, the pedigree here is pretty good. We have a 2 mana creature, 2 mana 2/2, which is reasonable, very reasonable stats, and this is just a birthing bod for artifacts. Now, artifacts are the most broken card type in Magic for the most part, you know, and birthing bod is very, very good. This is a cheaper birthing bod. I think this card is very, very powerful, but again, kind of like the other white artifact-y card, you need things to do with it. We played this card in 10 New Brews. It was all right, but there aren't really enough good artifacts to like do things with, you know? So definitely probably more of a card for older formats, format like Modern, maybe even Historic, where there are a variety of artifacts. You can kind of put together a good pod chain, things like that. I'm sure there's some pod chain you can like win the game with. Probably, I would assume, that I haven't really thought of, but kind of a card to watch. I don't think this card's going to do much immediately, but if the right cards happen at the right times, I think this card could be reasonable. It is definitely somewhat, held back by being a white card. If this card was blue, I think it looks a lot better, but I don't think you should underestimate this card. I think this card is a very real card in older formats, possibly. And then in Standard, there needs to be enough artifacts, but maybe. In Limited, you probably don't have enough artifacts in your deck. But it's a bear, so really, realistically, like, this card's not the worst card to play. You know, if you need a bear, it's a bear. Plays all with Emery. Yes, Emery does exist. Again, I played a deck in Standard and 10 New Brews. It was this, Emery, and the Agent Smith or whatever. And it was certainly cool, but we'll see. We'll see. And then Legacy, yeah, I'm sure you can build your deck in Legacy, or if you untap with this card and play, you just win the game on the spot. Same with Commander. So this card will get better the more better artifacts there is. Simple as that. Paladin class. Now, everyone in chat was saying when I chose Best in Show for the Venture Night that Paladin class is Best in Show. I'm not really impressed with this card. I'm not willing to like fully poo-poo it and say it's like a total overrated or a total bust or anything like that. But I just don't think it's that exciting. 1 mana, your spells your opponents cast during your turn cost 1 more to cast. Sure, that's like certainly good against some decks. You know, counterspell decks, kind of control decks. Making your opponent's removal spells cost 1 more on your turn is cool. Is it worth a card? It's not really. You know, it's an okay effect. We saw this on Tithe Taker a while ago. And there aren't also really that many like draw go control decks, you know, floating around at the moment anyway. So the first ability feels contextual, feels almost like sideboard level, right? Chapter 2 is creatures you control get +1/+1, so a Glorious Anthem. However, it's a 4 mana Glorious Anthem because you got to pay for it and then play 3, which is a pretty big investment, honestly. You know, that's not cheap, and Glorious Anthem is not exactly a world-beating Magic card. Glorious Anthem is illegal in Standard, has been legal for a while now, has seen exactly 0 play. More of a relic of times past. I played Glorious Anthem in my Standard decks like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but cards are just better now. It's not really about playing a bunch of crappy creatures and making them good. You just play good creatures, right? You know, why bother playing crappy creatures? So the Anthem part is certainly a little clunky. Then the third chapter is 5 mana. Whenever you attack, until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature and gains double strike. That part is pretty cool, and it is very expensive. It's kind of a cool mana sink for an aggro deck. Obviously, if you're flooded and you have a few crappy creatures in play, you can sink your mana into it. That's pretty cool too. But realistically, I just don't think this card is really constructed worthy. Like, unless the first ability is exceptionally good for some reason, everything this card does is pretty inefficient. 4 mana Glorious Anthem, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana, you know, Embercleave, kind of like, you know, soft Embercleave. I just don't think it's very exciting. You know, I just don't think that any of the things this card does are like really, really on the bar for constructed, except for maybe the first ability as far as like cost goes. So I'm kind of unenthused. I think this card could definitely see play a little bit. I think it's contextual as far as how good the first ability is. But I think this card is pretty much overrated. I haven't actually played with it yet, or seen it in play. But that's my gut. That's what my gut is telling me. Could see, you know, mild play in Standard. Don't think it goes to any format beyond that unless the first ability is really relevant. I think it's overrated. Folks. That's what I got on this one. In Limited, however, balls to the wall. Go nuts. To get a Glorious Anthem and other effect. This card seems really good in Limited, of course. And making your opponent's 4 mana removal spell cost 5 on your turn is definitely a real thing too. Kind of gives your cards like a pseudo ward. So super fine for Limited, but not really exciting. So kind of just I think this card's pretty overrated. Up next is Paladin Shield, 2 mana for an equipment. Has Flash, comes into play. You attach it for free, and it gives +0/+2. This is your standard sort of like combat trick in Limited. It leaves behind an 0/2 equipment, which is like okay. The cool thing is that if you have some sort of an equipment synergy, this can trigger at instant speed, and maybe your creature gets a buff for being equipped. This can do that, and what it does also, but kind of just like a middling draft common on the card that like has been printed a lot of times in various forms and just kind of If it gave +1/+0, I am all about it. I love the Indomitable Will, but I think +0/+2 is like not really what we're looking for. So kind of just a middling draft common. Wouldn't be too thrilled to have this card in my deck unless I had serious synergies for equipment. Up next is Planner Ally, 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer, which is already okay and Limited. Whenever it attacks you, venture. This card seems phenomenal. Again, venturing repeatedly seems like a great place to be in Limited, and putting that ability onto a very reasonably costed card with evasion seems awesome. This is probably a top tier draft common. Just very, very consistent, very, very reasonable. Like this card a lot. I think it's very, very good. Obviously not playing this card constructed, but this is probably a top tier draft common if I had to guess, you know. So common Angel too. Plate Armor, even more equipment. 3 mana for an equipment. Hip creature gets +3/+3 and is ward 1, which is a pretty reasonable stat here. and it has equip 3. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each other equipment you control. The equipment deck never works, I feel like. I feel like they've tried to make the equipment deck like an archetype and limited for like 10 different sets, and it never really works. This one is very powerful. Giving your creature +3/+3 is very, very good. And if this thing can cost 2 to equip, if you say you have 2 equipments, that's very, very good also. It is very clunky. I imagine this card is better in sealed, also better if your curve is lower, but this is probably a pretty reasonable limited card. Again, better in sealed, better in slower formats, slower decks, things like that. But it is clunky. I would not want to have 2 of this card in my deck. And again, I don't really think you want to care that much about having a bunch of equipments because it's kind of Fervent Champion, sure. It's good. Fervent Champion. Fervent Champion is a card to watch, honestly. There are a lot of equipments, and equipping for free is very powerful. But yeah, I'm not super excited about this card. Up next is Portable Hole, which is just a really awesome. Let's just hear it for Wizards for this card. Cool, clever design. It's fun. It's catchy, and it's quite powerful too. Actually, 1 white for an artifact, and this thing is a glass casket for any non-land permanent that costs 2 or less. So Ren and 6. Aether Vial, creatures, Noble Hierarch, Tarmogoyf. If this thing hits a lot of things, is going to be much better in older formats than newer formats. Imagine this card's going to be, Legacy, Modern, and so on and so forth. The problem is they just went and printed a better card than this in Modern Horizons 2 in Prismatic Ending, which basically does everything this card does, but just much better. And then this is one of the cards they spoiled really early. I believe this card was spoiled like months ago, like before the Modern Horizons spoilers were even out. So I did like this card. I was pretty high on this card then. But now that Prismatic Ending is legal in both Legacy and Modern, the places where this card would be at its best. I'm not super big on Portable Hole doing a lot. I do think it is very, very good as a sideboard card in Standard. Just very, very efficient removal. But I do think Prismatic Ending definitely limits this card's ability in older formats where it would have shined really, really well. But kind of cool. Is an artifact if that matters too as far as synergy goes. And then limited, probably more of a sideboard card. Don't think I'd want to start this card in my limited deck. Just too much chance for it to be dead. And it's an artifact though for your artifact cards, right? Got that going for it. Up next is Potion of Healing. 2-mana artifact comes into play, draw a card. So like we've seen this effect 100,000 times. Pay white, 1 white, sacrifice it to drain 3. This is like pretty middling. It's not super exciting. 2 mana for an artifact that draws a card. We've seen this see play in various formats for a reason, but gaining 3. I mean, Rejuvenate costs 2. It doesn't see any play. Again, it's kind of a cool card. We were playing this card in our Oswald pod deck because it's a cool card to pod away, but just feels like it's not good enough for what it does. If it gained 5 life or it just did something a little more than what it is, sure. But as a synergy piece, not very excited about it. Not sure what you'd want in limited for this card. There is some life gain synergy. But yeah, Golden Egg, same idea for sure. So not very exciting. I mean, if your draft deck needs a source of life gain to trigger stuff, sure, but whatever. Priest of Ancient Lore. This card is freaking awesome. I'm very, very happy to see, Wizards told us 2 years ago that white's going to get card draw effects. Then they printed that, 3-mana sorcery, each player draws 3 cards, and we were all like, really? That's what card draw is? But this card's awesome. Sort of the same vein of Third Inspector, one of the coolest white cards ever. Just card advantage. The 2-1 draws a card. Sort of a reverse Phyrexian Rager. This card's great. I think it's a little underpowered. If it was a 2-2, I'd be a little happier, obviously. But I like the direction this is going in. White is one of the few colors that can't make card advantage really at all. This card does that. This card will definitely see play in Standard at some point. Great draft common. Like this card a lot. Super, super cool. Great with Yorion, as long as Yorion's still legal. Like it a lot, and I'm also very happy with the direction it's going in. Up next is Rally Maneuver. The mana for an instant. Target gets +2/+0 and gains first strike until the end of turn. Up to one other creature gets +0/+2 and lifelink until the end of turn. This feels like a really good draft trick. This is going to make a 2-for-1 a lot of the time. It is probably a little transparent at times, but I think that unless your opponent's really, really, really good, they're going to fall into this card most of the time. It gains you life. It can save 2 of your creatures. Just a top-notch limited card. I think it's a very, very good limited trick. Gaining life is great too, and this card's going to be a blowout, like a large portion of the time. I think this card's really, really cool. Definitely want this in every aggressive limited deck I have. If you're not super aggressive, but I do think that this card is a very, very good limited trick, for sure. For sure. Up next is Ranger's Hawk, which is a flying 1/1 for 1. You can tap 3 and tap it and another creature. You can venture. That part's awesome, but you can only activate it as a sorcery. So this is more of like a board stall kind of repeatable effect. The cost here is very high. As an instant, I think this card would have been busted, like insanely good. But having to tap 2 of your creatures on your turn, we saw this with the mechanic Outlast, where just sorcery speed tapping your own creatures for a minor effect, it's tough. And tapping 2 of your creatures is really tough. You're leaving yourself very, very open. So I think your deck is really defensive and you're really like a good late game effect. This is a possibility. If your deck's really aggressive and the 1/1 flyer for 1 is like sort of in the ballpark of what you want, but I think this card's going to play a little worse than it looks, despite the ability to venture often. I think if you're under any sort of pressure, this card's going to be pretty bad. But definitely think venturing is very important, so I'm going to give it a try for sure. But I'm a little down on this card. I think it's a little too fragile and a little too much of a cost for what you're getting for it. So I think it's constructed now. Steadfast Paladin. Folks, don't underestimate the power of a 2/2 lifelinker for 2. This has been one of the best white commons in the last few draft formats. I'm sure it'll be very good in this format also. It plays very well with equipment. It buffers your life total. It's good if you're defensive or offensive. It races really well. Just a very, very solid draft common. All about it. All about it for sure. Put this card in your draft decks early and often. This is not just a regular bear. This is a bear you really, really want. Yeah, Story Seeker. I forget all the names this card has had in the past few years, but very, very solid common. Very, very solid common. Do not sleep on this card in limited. Up next is Teleportation Circle. 4 mana for enchantment. Beginning of your end step, you can flicker an artifact or a creature. This is just like Thassa, God of the whatever, with like no other upside. I think if this card cost 3, it would be quite good. But as a 4 mana enchantment, I just don't think this card's that good and constructed. I tried building a deck around it. It was a black-white deck with various, comes into play effects. But like, it just didn't, like, you just play Thassa, and Thassa gives you like 2 other abilities, So I think this card's a little underpowered for constructed. In limited, obviously this card can be very, very good. The 2/1 that gains a life and draws a card, phenomenal card to flicker. There's a few common artifacts to flicker, draw cards and stuff like that. But I think overall this card's a trap in limited. In constructed. And then in limited, if you can really build your deck around it, sure. But I just think this card's kind of I'm not really super about it. I think that you're not really getting what you're paying for here. And, again, Thassa does the exact same thing with many more abilities and sees almost no play. So not really super about it. Up next is Veteran Dungeoneer. You want to venture? This card seems super solid. Obviously, pretty good with the last card in limited, right? So I'm sure in limited you can make this card work for sure. But 3/4 for 4 with upside of venturing. Card seems great. Card seems really solid. Body's fine. Venturing is worth like maybe half a card. It's hard to really know exactly what it's worth. But super solid draft common. Wouldn't play like a million of these, obviously, because you want to make sure your curve is going to work out right. But likes card a lot. Super solid draft common. Then we have White Dragon. Now, you all know how good Bergstrider was in Kaldheim Limited. Well, this is a Bergstrider that flies and doesn't need Snowlands. So really, really good draft uncommon. Almost like a mythic level draft uncommon, I think. 4/4 flyer for 6 is very reasonable. And then the Bergstrider ability is just so good. It's funny. It's not better than the Mythic Dragon is, but this card's really, really good. Like this card a lot. Just very, very good draft card. That's all I gotta say, honestly. You hear something on the watch. You blank instance. You get to choose one. Pretty fun. I like the flavor of these. Again, I do not like that with it looks like a keyword ability, but very cool, very flavorful cards. 2 mana instant. You can either rouse the party and give your crew +1/+1, or you can deal 5 damage to an attacking creature. This is a very reasonable draft card, honestly. 2 mana to deal 5 damage to an attacker is not like amazing, but solid. And then pumping your team +1/+1 is also not amazing, but solid. But the flexibility of both is pretty good. And typically these sort of like deal damage to attacker cards are really bad in aggro decks. But this allows you to be good on both sides, where it's good in aggro decks, you can pump also. So this card's really cool. Solid card. Wouldn't want a ton of these in my draft deck, but this card does seem very solid to me. Very flexible. Like it a lot. Your Ambush on the Road. This card I think is a lot better than it looks. I actually played this card in one of my 10 new brews in the White Weenie deck. +1/+3 is a reasonable trick. If you know me, you know my set reviews, you know me playing limited. I am huge on any trick that costs 1. 1 mana tricks are so hard to play around. And +1/+3 is going to win most creature combats. That's awesome. Great tempo play. And then also Make a Retreat allows you to return a creature back to your hand. So they go to kill your creature, you go to kill your Lurrus, just bounce it back, play it again next turn. So not the best protection spell ever. It is reasonable. And then the +1/+3 is also reasonable too. I'm about this card. I'm about this card a lot. I would want a bunch of this card in my deck, but I think this is a very, very solid limited trick that's going to be hard to play around and do a lot more than you would think for only 1 mana. So like this card a lot. And then again, in Constructed, if you're dying for an instant or a pump spell, you could do worse. You could do worse. And that's it. That's white. So first color I've done. If you're tuning in, welcome. How's it going? YouTube folks, love you. Like, comment, subscribe. Overall, white's been pretty good. I know white. The word on the street is that white's very, very good in the post-rotation standard. There's a lot of good white cards, honestly. They've been slowly kind of creeping up on us, which is pretty cool. So we're going to move on to blue, but all my YouTube folks, like, comment, subscribe. Look for that in a different video. Look for 10 new brews. Look for my other set review videos. Look for my cool stuff article. I'm casting the Stream League tomorrow. It's just so much stuff to do. So much stuff to do. I love y'all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube. All right? Peace.